Fit to Love, Season 2, Episode 22, Preventing Burnout. Today's show was brought to you by Audible.com. Get a free audiobook download and 30-day free trial at fittolovebook.com.
Hey, this is John Lee Dumas from EO Fire. Get ready to get physically, emotionally, and spiritually fit with LA's best personal trainer and empowerment strategist, JJ Flizanes.
Fit to Love is physical, emotional, and spiritual fitness to achieve the happy life you deserve. From exercise to cooking, relationships, and spirituality, you'll find all the inspiration you need right here with our host, JJ Flizanes.
Hello and welcome to Fit to Love Thoughtful Thursdays. Today's show, Preventing Burnout. We have Ramy Chaussee. She is quite possibly America's #1 unstuckologist. She has X-ray vision for seeing the trouble spots that exist in every frozen situation and the creativity to transform it instantly. Ramy is the best-selling author of Living Life as an Exclamation Point and creator of the Get Unstuck Revolution for extraordinary women with big-ass dreams who are ridiculously unsatisfied with status quo. Ramy has been featured on the Business Beware Show on Fox Business, the On the Edge Show, a CBS affiliate, Smart Money Talk Radio, an NBC affiliate, and the Women's Information Network. She is the host of a weekly podcast, which you'll find at thegetunstuckrevolution.com. Welcome to the show, Ramy.
Thank you. Good to be here.
So today's show, Preventing Burnout. Before we talk about preventing burnout, can we just talk about burnout? Like what kind of words or definition would you give burnout?
I hear overwhelm. I hear spinning out of control, or just spinning your wheels. I hear a lot about, I don't know how to set priorities. I have so much to do, or I have so many ideas. And we burn ourselves out, I think, from trying to be, it's not even trying to be a superwoman. It's that we have this vision in mind and we want to bring it to fruition and we want it done right. And so we keep everything on our plate. Yeah, burnout is something that I have struggled with for many years, and I really had to come up with a way to get things prioritized so that I could not only prevent it, but bounce back from it if it did happen.
Let's talk about that's a lot of the mental sort of ideas, a definition of burnout. How do you describe burnout on a physical and emotional level?
You know, this is kind of why I created the Get Unstuck Revolution, because what I noticed was that people would come to me and they would say, I'm feeling stuck. That was like the most common thing I would hear. And so I think that tends to be how it manifests itself. You know, burnout is one thing that could be physical. Yes, you could begin to feel it in your body, but I think mentally it kind of takes over this place of, I give up. I just don't know what to do next. Right? Okay. What do you see?
Yeah.
What do you see with people you work with?
Well, burnout is another name. It's more of the common name for adrenal fatigue. Adrenal fatigue is when your adrenal glands, your cortisol and your DHEA, are both tapped out and have been overutilized and under-replenished because we don't slow down. And things that affect burnout would be, and cause adrenal fatigue, would be having too much caffeine. Stress is the biggest component. And then, of course, sleep. Lack of sleep, lack of good sleep. And so on a physical level, when someone has adrenal fatigue, they probably feel like they've got some kind of burnout on multiple levels. They're burned out physically because when the physical body is at that place of adrenal fatigue, you're not clear. You're foggy in your mind. You're emotionally sensitive more so than normal because, again, you're not resilient. You haven't been able to replenish and rejuvenate all of the stores of your body, all the energetic stores, in order to be at your best and to be able to be resilient or problem solve or have positive energy. Because what I think a lot of people in the spiritual community and people that do law of attraction work, I know we're on a Thoughtful Thursday, but a lot of people think, oh, I'm supposed to be in a good mood, or I should be able to be positive in every situation. And while that's nice to think about, if you're lacking sleep, you can't burn the candle at both ends and think you're going to have some energy to do that. Like, it takes energy to be positive. It takes energy to problem solve. So for me, burnout brings up, on a physical side and on a weight loss side, adrenal fatigue. But I was just curious for you, because I also understand and am more like you in that the burnout in my mind, that translates into that emotional frustration and overwhelm and giving up and defeat and powerless and victim and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, you're more in the fitness world and I'm more in the business world, so we kind of have two different viewpoints, and I really appreciate everything you're saying. For me, it's often too much stimulation. I'm one of these people that, I wish I could get by on 4 hours or even 7 hours, but I'm a 9-hour sleep person, so I have to set my clock to go to bed at an appropriate hour to start my day on time. But if I don't get the full 9 hours, if I drop back to 8 or 7, I'm just toast, completely toast the next day.
I'm really happy you mentioned that because I was interviewed recently on a video podcast from a guy doing a fitness podcast, and he had on some doctor talking about sleep. And I wanted to make sure, because it was a more fitness based podcast, that I said, well, it isn't just 8 hours. It's actually a range, and it's about 7 to 9 or even more, because it depends.
Yeah.
Because energetically, the night before that interview, I had 8 hours of sleep and I woke up exhausted because, as you were just talking about, that mental energy,
Yes.
too much stimulation, too much going on. I had too much going on for too long, too many days. That was all fun stuff that I chose to do. But even still, with 8 hours of sleep, I wasn't rejuvenated. I wasn't rested enough. So anyway, so burnout, I'm glad we're defining this, because on different levels, we have a lot of people. Obviously, this show spans mostly physical, emotional, mental, and spiritual. We don't do as much with business, but there is definitely overlap with all of it, of course, because burnout for someone who's a mom can be equally physical as well as mental and emotional. And the same problem solving skills that a business owner would use is something a parent could use to get through those situations.
It all overlaps. I mean, it truly does. I have a lot of people who come to me and say, I'm feeling stuck with my income. It's just not moving. I can't get to that next level. And often they come to me and say it's my income, when it's really their relationship, or it's really their momship. It's really some other thing. It bleeds over. It bleeds over. So for me, in preventing burnout, so I'm so glad we're defining this too. For me, with too much stimulation, for instance, right now I'm taking a really intense, about a 15-day course that's eating up my brain cells like the old Pac-Man. And so I get too much stimulation online. Other people get too much stimulation offline, right? And so you're right. I think the number of hours of sleep you need is going to be appropriate for your own life, whatever that is.
And I do want to mention, I'm glad you said that, because we're just going to keep complimenting each other on what we're saying for this entire show. But I'm glad you said that, because it really, on a business side, it reminded me also astrologically, maybe the show does need to move to a Freedom Friday, astrologically, that some people, so for instance, you mentioned about stimulation online. I feel the same way because my brain doesn't work like that. But how many people do you know, like, that write code or that do things on a very technical level? I consider myself pretty smart, and I'm a very good student and I learn very well. But when I sit with my programmers and watch them do code, I'm going to tell you, within 2 to 5 minutes of trying to understand what they're doing, I feel like my brain is zapped, and then I no longer can think clearly for the rest of the day. It's like a short circuit of my brain.
I echo that.
So I think for people to understand, for them personally, what challenges you, what burns you out, and to make sure that you know what those things are. Like, so I avoid at all costs trying to figure out when someone's doing code on a computer. I don't look anymore because I don't compute with it.
Yeah, I want to echo that. Let me tell you why this is so important, because we do let other people bleed into our lives in ways that are inappropriate. As an example, I'm in this particular online group learning how to do something, and I happen to mention one day my brain short circuits when I start talking technical stuff. I'm a creative. I'm not technical. And somebody responded back to me, as happens almost every day of my life, well, if you would just take a little bit of time to learn some of this technology, your life would probably be easier. So invalidating, right? Because some of us are just not made up for that. Does that make sense? Like, I'm not a mom. I know not to be a mom. That is definitely, I know I would be a horrible mom. And other people, my own mother's one of them. Well, but once you have your first, but you always know what's right for you. And I think that's an important thing that you bring up about setting these boundaries and knowing what we're good at and what we're not good at.
Right. And what makes sense to us. So for the person that can read code, I often tell people, and there's probably judgment about that too. Like, I'm not a shopper. Shopping actually zaps my mind.
I love shopping.
And I'm not, okay, good. That's where we're different.
Yes.
I'm not a shopper, and I'm also not an errand runner. If you ask me to, like, go to 3 different stores or go pick, I'm dead. I am just, but yet I can go work out. I can go create podcasts. I can be interviewed 5 times. I can go speak in front of audiences. I can dance for 4 or 5 hours in a row and not ever get burned out. But yet, 5 minutes of code, forget it. I'm done.
Complete burnout. Yeah.
So I think this conversation, let's start off with the theme of preventing burnout and being aware of how things affect you. And so that has to be the first responsibility, right? If someone to say, I need to understand how I'm affected by these things, and then make steps to understand that.
Yeah. So let's go there. So I brought your audience an exercise that I think will help a lot, because one thing I love is the practical application. I can get things in my head, I can get the concept, but until I have something on paper that I can see, a lot of times it won't make sense. So I want everybody to pull out a piece of paper and just draw a circle like a clock face, right? And in the very middle of the circle, let's call this how to stop spinning your wheels. So we have kind of a framework, or how to get out of overwhelm, if that helps you better. So right in the center of that clock face, you're going to write down a little circle and write objective right in the middle. What's your objective? And then at 12 o'clock on the clock face, you can do a little circle and write in viability target. Viability meaning, what's it going to be worth to you? What's important to you? We'll come back to this in a minute, but I want you to have the picture first. At the 2 o'clock position, you'll draw a circle and write the word create. At the 4 o'clock position, your little circle will say promote. At the 6 o'clock position will be scorecard. At the 8 o'clock position will be debug or detangle. Pivot is a word I like to use right there. And at the 10 o'clock position, that circle would say new actions.
Now, can someone be doing this because what I got caught up with create and promote, and what if I don't have a business?
I'll give you a link where you can get the handout. How's that?
Great. But in terms of but if someone who's listening doesn't have a business,
Yeah.
and create and promote,
I'm going to
stick
show
them.
you. Yeah, I'm going to show you how it works.
Okay.
I just wanted you to have
Okay.
the framework, be able to see it visually. Now, I asked you to draw a clock face, but in reality, this is going to be a spiral. So objective is the front of the spiral, and new actions would actually open that clock face up, so you have a way to escape it in reality. And like I say, I'll give you a link to the handout so you can see it visually. So what you want to do, let's start with the example of relationships. Well, let's start with the example of business. I think that'll be an easier place to start for those who are solopreneurs or have a side job or a side hobby even. So before you start a new program, or if you're tangled up in one that you can't get to go the way you want it to go, you're feeling burnout, this is how you clean the slate and start over. Write down your objective right in the middle. Let's say you have a hobby and you like to go to the craft fair and sell your handmade purses on the weekends. So your objective might be, I want my hobby to make money. Your viability target would be, what do I have to do to know that this is a viable thing? For instance, do I need to get feedback from people going, ooh, ah, over my purses, right? What would make it viable? What would make it important or worthy to me? And then the create step would be, actually, what kind of purses am I going to make? The promote is pretty obvious. You're going to go to the fair and promote it. And then about halfway around your circle here, that's your scorecard, where you're going to look back and say, how am I doing? Because this is where you say, did I set the proper objective for what I'm really wanting to do here? Or did I really set a viability target? If you just bought a bunch of yarn and said, I don't know what I want to make with it, and you're making a bunch of stuff and your fingers start hurting, guess what? You're going to get burnout in your fingers, right? So the scorecard is a good way of saying, am I feeling burnout? If so, I missed my objective, or I missed establishing my viability target. And then you keep moving around to the debug or to the pivot, because based on the way you've looked back over your circles so far, you may want to make some tweaks and do things a little bit differently. So this is where you make 2 columns on a piece of paper, what worked, what didn't. No judgment. No judgment at all. It either worked or it didn't. And this is where you find out these things like, I hate technology. I'm only going to do the things I'm good at. I'm no longer going to run errands. When you look at what works and what doesn't, it's an easy way to begin to separate out those things that cause burnout. And based on that, now you can come up with your new actions. Maybe you've discovered you don't like making purses at all. Now, let's switch over and talk about relationships and see how you can apply this a little bit differently. Let's say that you have, a 13-year-old. We know how much fun that can be. They're beginning to exercise their boundaries, right? And so your objective is that you want to create some new rules because things have gotten out of hand, and you're pulling your hair out and you're screaming inside your house at each other all the time, and something has to stop. So you create a new objective, and your objective might be what? We want to make up some new house rules. As a for instance, your viability target would be, what's going to make this viable? For instance, well, we need to get agreement on both sides, or we need to get agreement from everybody in the household to make this a viable plan. Can't be one-sided with a teenager, right? And then you go about creating the plan. What are our rules going to be? What are the boundaries going to be? How can we create this to be still a fun environment, but one that has boundaries? Or maybe we need to add in some creative activities to help get some of this emotion under control, right? Maybe it's go take a ropes course. I don't know. The promote step is going to be that you're going to have to promote it within your family. Even if you're a single mom with one child, the promotion has to happen. You got to get people on board with it. Whether you're in business or it's your own family, it's the same thing. You have to promote it, right? But then halfway through your project, and I recommend 30 days for any good project, halfway through, you're going to want to look back and say, how are we doing? Am I getting an A plus? Am I getting a D minus? Am I making $100 a month? Am I making $10,000 a month? Your scorecard is always going to be, how am I doing? Measured by money or in percentages. I'm doing 20% better. You see this at the chiropractor. And based on your scorecard, then you move into the pivot step or the debug. What's working, what's not. No judgment, especially not with a teenager. You each get to make your own check sheet of what's working and what's not working, because that's how we negotiate. And based on that, you come up with new actions. Things have either gotten better and they're working or they're not working. But based on that, now we come up with a new plan. The idea is to do these in 30-day segments. And I really came up with this idea about 100 years ago when I was in real estate investing. And I thought, escrow really has this right, because when you're in escrow, everybody's in agreement. We know what has to be done by when. Right, so when you have these confines, when you're getting agreements and when you're trying to move a situation along, right, like even if you're launching a book, whether it's your own plan or someone else's, if you can be in agreement with your publisher, your publicist, your editor, whoever you're working with, even with a book project, the same thing can be applied.
So it makes sense. And for those who are not business owners, or it's funny because you said you're the creative, yet this is very strategic. And this is a very much left brain activity. Yes. of analyzing and creating the plan. And that's very strategic and linear. Yeah. And almost masculine. I mean,
it's almost masculine.
Love,
yeah.
Well, and then that's not a bad thing. I mean, we all have, especially women, we all have the capacity to do that. And there's times that we need that, or it needs to be provided for us if we're not going to do it. Somebody needs to be the masculine energy to create these kinds of structures that give us the freedom and the point of view of how's it going, and when it's not going the right way, what small thing needs to be tweaked, versus a complete right brain, creative, feminine approach would be not to make a structure. and then there's an emotional reaction to that. And then there's a potential pivot 180 degrees. And now you're doing something completely different, and you threw the baby out with the bathwater.
And it's so funny because without exception, everyone that I've shown this formula to has said exactly the same thing. Oh, it takes the emotion out. Because remember, emotion is energy, and very, very, very often those emotions live from our ego, which is really there sometimes just to destroy everything we touch. Right?
The ego, absolutely. But I want to address this from another perspective when we get back, and I want to, because we do need to take a moment to thank our sponsors. But I want to, for those people who are listening that are what you described you as being earlier, the creative, the right brain, the emotional, the feminine, what one first step that they can do on creating this, or how to get help so that this in itself doesn't feel like overwhelm and burnout. So we'll be right back.
Do you love listening to audiobooks? Or do you think you'd read more if you could listen to them? Well, for you listeners, Audible is offering a free audiobook download with a free 30-day trial to give you the opportunity to check out their service. With over 150,000 titles to choose from for your iPhone, Android, Kindle, or MP3 player. To download your free audiobook today, go to fit2lovebook.com. That's FIT2LOVE book.com to get your free audiobook with your free 30-day trial to Audible. If you're unhappy with your trial and you don't want to continue, you get to cancel before the 30 days are over and keep your free audiobook. It is 100% risk-free. So go to fit2lovebook.com. That's FIT2LOVEBOOK.com to get your free audiobook today. Do you want to look and feel years younger? Learn more about your hormone health and how to get properly tested.
Sign up for the Healthy Hormone Kit at nourishingwellness.com. It features the essential tests you need to tell your doctor to order for you to learn more about your current levels. Plus, you'll receive lots of healthy eating and lifestyle tips to improve your hormone health naturally. nourishingwellness.com. Okay, Rami, so I have obviously worked my masculine muscle, and I like that part of me exists. Sometimes I want it to calm down a little bit because the feminine is really where the rejuvenation comes. So for those people who are out there and they do have businesses, or they are strategic and they understand this, they're going to do this, no problem. Thank you. Oh my God, I got it. Okay, that's going to be half the population. They're going to say, I got it. That's brilliant. Now, there's going to be another part that are going, holy crap, I can't do any of that. That's too hard. That's too much. I don't understand. I don't know how to do all that. So what would you tell them?
I got you. This is one of the reasons that I created this, is because I heard a lot of life coaches, for instance, saying, I'm so tired of people telling me, oh, I just want to sit with this for a while, or I need a little time to process it, or I just want to pray about it, or insert any number of other, shall we call them, excuses or reasons. And the thing is, that's what keeps you stuck. And remember, I'm the unstuckologist, so you don't come to me because you want to stay stuck. You come to me because you got burnout and you need to do something different, right? So while I honor where you are and not wanting to be structural or not wanting to take on the masculine energy, I also encourage you that with your feminine side and your creative side and your rejuvenation side, it will require a certain element of masculine energy to balance, unless you're really good at just being in flow, and there are those people.
Can I offer something because this actually happened to me. It was around money, and it was around my business when I had done a workshop, and I had a lot of resistance to doing the bookkeeping stuff and to looking at things on an analytical level. No problem with the creative and selling stuff and taking money. That was all fine. It was on the counting and it was on the bean counting, and then the comparison, and then all of that stuff that we're just going to call it accounting, right? And I would get upset at what I thought my results needed to be, and they weren't. And so I was feeling, so this is where to me, using your emotions to take a situation where in my mind, I was embarrassed and I had shame, and I was sad, I was frightened, and I had all this negative emotion that was stopping me from doing the left brain linear work. And so I'd said to myself, this has gone on too long. This is years ago. This has gone on too long. I am not able to do this by myself, and I need help. Okay, so in order for me, and I feel horrible about it. So once I acknowledged my shame and I allowed that to come out, then I said, okay, so what do I need to turn this from feeling like fear and shame into feeling like something I can do? And the first thought was, well, I have to work with somebody who already loves and respects me, who's not going to blame or shame me. And in my mind, I then went, oh, and I had a client at the time who I was working with, who I saw every week, who used to work for the IRS. So in terms of knowing all that stuff, and he had looked at my stuff in the past, so he already knew the situation. I thought, great. That was number one. Number two, I want it to be, I need to be accountable for it, because if I'm not accountable, it's not going to get done. Anything that you have huge resistance to, you need accountability for making these steps and making these changes, especially when it's not your strength. So at the same time, I thought, well, that same person could be accountable. Then I thought, well, especially with where I was, I don't want to make this a huge financial commitment. I want to be able to take it kind of one day at a time or 1 week at a time and on a regular basis. And at that point, he was already built into my schedule. And I thought, and I bet you he'd love to help me, and I could repay him through taking him to dinner and having a good bottle of wine. And so all of a sudden, I created a situation in my mind that, like, what would feel good? How could I do this in the most comfortable way? And when I put all that together and I was emailing him, he's like, sure, sounds great. All of a sudden, I was excited to meet with him and become accountable and start to learn and have someone help me with putting this together, because it wasn't my strength.
Well, you actually just worked the formula. If you go back and look at your notes on your page, you'll see that you actually went through every single step.
Right. I just did it mentally first.
Yeah.
Mentally and emotionally first, because my first order of business was to ease the resistance emotionally that I had to doing it.
Right. And so for anyone who has embarrassment or shame or any of these kinds of emotions around it, what's often happened is you're being called to a new objective, which is right at the center of this formula. The old objective isn't working. Right? So you're being called to a new objective, and those emotions will often reflect that. It's that gap between what I want and what I don't want. The emotions are there to show you, oh, this is what I don't want. right? And so you can stay in those emotions, or you can say, oh, well, what is it that I do want? Let's close that gap. And that's where that new objective comes in.
Got it. So in order to prevent burnout, we do the plan.
So as an example, to stay off of business, I don't have children. I never have. I've never been that's not my calling. And I can't think of anything worse than being a mom and a wife and having to come home and cook dinner every night. Can't think of anything worse, especially not if I'm working full time. And that's going to cause me a lot of burnout and a lot of negative emotion, let's say, panic, all those negative emotions, right? So in that kind of a situation, even if, use a gardening metaphor, it won't matter. The idea is when you're feeling that burnout, set your new objective. My objective maybe is just not to feel burnout. Maybe that's the objective. Or to identify something I'd rather feel than burnout. Maybe I want to feel some sense of freedom. That can be your starting point. And then what's going to make it viable for me? What's going to make it worthy? Well, somebody else needs to come in and cook dinner because this is just not my thing. It's creating me too much stress, which brings you into that create cycle. Well, how can we create something different? There's in-home delivery. There's other people in the house learn how to cook. There's, hire somebody to do it. How can we create a solution? And then you would promote it to the family, right? Can we all be on board with this? Yeah. So it's all the same thing. Even the scorecard a while ago when you said somebody has to be accountable. That's what the scorecard is all about, to look at what's working and what isn't.
And you have this outline so people can fill it out, or do they write it themselves?
I have an outline. I love it when people can draw their own, but they can also go to, I'll give you a tiny URL, tinyurl.com/profit handout. And this is, when you get the handout, it is called the monetization cycle. If you own a business and you want to turn your profits around in 30 days, that's what it's good for. But as we've talked about, it has a lot of different application. But on the handout, it also has some of the most common mistakes that people make, as well as the formula just spelled out in detail for you.
So tinyurl.com/profit handout. Okay, that will also be at fitslove.tv for anyone that is working out or driving while you're listening to this and you don't have the hands free to write it down or to go to the website right now and get it. You can come back to the site in case you have all this information now in your head and you want to download it and work on it for yourself. So any last thoughts about preventing burnout?
I would say that no matter how dark it gets, the sun's going to rise again. And if you can keep that as a belief and just know that that's the truth, and look towards that sunlight, keep your eye on the brightness, it will turn.
Absolutely. And making sure that you address what your needs are, get your needs met, find community that you can commune with in order to know that you're not alone, because every problem or situation has other people who've experienced the same thing. And I think a lot of times people feel like they're the only ones dealing with it. So reach out and make sure to try to get your needs met. Make sure to check out tinyurl.com/profit handout, as well as the getunstuckrevolution.com. Ramey, do you have shows on your podcast for non-business owners?
No, it's all directed towards entrepreneurs and solopreneurs. Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay, because maybe somebody, I'm just curious, maybe somebody has an idea about something they think they might want to do. So that might be a good place to go and learn about some information before you get started on writing your book or creating a product or a program or selling purses at the market or the fair on the weekends.
Yeah.
So if people want to work with you, how can they reach you?
The getunstuckrevolution.com. Lots of free stuff on there, lots of goodies.
Excellent. Ramey, thank you so much for coming to the show.
Thank you.
The Fit to Love podcast show offers you 6 days a week of helpful content to achieve the happy life you deserve. Movement Mondays and Tasty Tuesdays are weekly video casts, while Wellness Wednesdays, Thoughtful Thursdays, Freedom Fridays, and Sexy Saturdays are audio-only shows themed every week to address your holistic life and needs. If the show inspired you, we would love for you to share it and subscribe. Thank you so much for joining us today. Head on over to fittolove.tv for recaps of every show, resources, and to join the community. That's FIT2LOVE.tv. Have a fit and fabulous day.